Okay, so you know how it is. Sometimes you got all this stuff you need to get through articles, videos, you name it, and you just want someone to like cut through the noise and tell you what's really going on.
Well, yeah.
He sent in this YouTube video from the Bernie Sanders channel. It's called "Where Do We Go From Here?" And that's exactly what we're going to do today. Kind of like a deep dive into this thing.
Yeah, a deep dive into the core message and
right.
what the speaker is saying and what the proposed way forward is in the video.
So should we jump right in?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, cool.
Oh, yeah.
So the video, it basically breaks down into like two main parts.
Right.
First, you get this like pretty intense kind of like bad news analysis of where things are at politically.
Yeah, the current situation, kind of a State of the Union, you know.
Yeah, and then it shifts to a bit more of a hopeful tone.
Right.
And it lays out like what the speaker sees as a way for a good news path, you know?
Yeah, there's kind of a good news plan of action that gets articulated.
Okay, so let's start with the doom and gloom, you know?
Yeah.
The bad news first.
Right.
Okay, so the speaker's main argument, the big takeaway, you know, you're busy, you just need the headline. Is that basically under Trump, the U.S. is like rapidly heading towards what looks a lot like oligarchy.
Yeah.
Which is basically like ruled by a small group of really rich people.
Right. Ruled by the elites.
Exactly.
Ruled by the few.
Yeah, and along with that comes like authoritarianism and all this other, you know, corruption and inequality, all that stuff.
It's all connected in the speaker's view.
Totally. So how does he back this up? You know, like what's the evidence?
Well, the speaker goes right to the heart of it by, you know, invoking Lincoln's famous phrase.
Oh, right.
Okay, government of the people, by the people, and for the people.
Yeah.
And then immediately contrasts that with what they see as emerging now, which is a government of the billionaire class, by the billionaire class, and for the billionaire class.
Wow. Yeah. That's pretty stark.
Yeah, it's a pretty clear indictment of the current state of affairs in their view.
Yeah. So then they get into some specifics, right?
Absolutely.
They don't just kind of leave it hanging there like...
No, they give some concrete examples.
Okay.
One that they highlight is Elon Musk's huge $277 million contribution to Trump's election.
Oh, wow.
And the suggestion that Musk was basically promised a top government job in return for that.
Ooh, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's a pretty serious allegation.
Yeah.
And it really feeds into this whole idea that, you know, money equals power. And if you've got enough money, you can buy your way into political influence.
Right, like a straight up exchange kind of thing.
Exactly, like a quid pro quo situation.
Yeah, and it doesn't stop there, right?
No. The speaker also points out that Trump nominated something like 13 other billionaires to head up different federal agencies.
Gosh.
So, you know, it's not just this one isolated incident.
It's a pattern.
It seems to be part of a larger trend.
Yeah, so basically what they're saying is that this whole idea of oligarchy, this isn't like some new crazy idea.
Right.
It's something that's been kind of brewing, and now it's just like...
Yeah, they've been warning about this for a while, but they feel like it's become so obvious now that it's undeniable.
Okay, so that's the oligarchy part.
Right.
Now let's get into this whole authoritarianism thing.
All right.
Because that's another big piece of this bad news analysis, right?
It is.
So what's going on there? What's the speaker saying about that?
Well, you know, authoritarianism is basically all about concentrating power in the hands of a few, often at the expense of individual rights and democratic norms.
Gotcha.
And the speaker lists out a bunch of things that Trump has done that they say are basically signs of this authoritarian tendency.
Okay, like what?
Well, one of the first things they bring up is this accusation that Trump has usurped the powers of Congress.
Usurped, like take it over.
Yeah, like overstepped his authority.
Right.
Basically by ending programs and getting rid of agencies without getting approval from Congress.
Oh, wow, that's like a big no-no. Right?
Yeah, it goes against the whole separation of powers thing.
Right, checks and balances and all that.
Exactly. That's how our system is supposed to work.
Right. So they're saying that Trump is kind of like acting like a king or something.
In a way, yeah, like he's above the law or doesn't have to follow the rules.
Yeah, okay. And then what else?
Well, they also talk a lot about these attacks on the media.
Right, free speech and all that.
Exactly.
Right.
They mention all these lawsuits that have been filed against major news organizations.
Oh, yeah.
Like ABC, CBS Meta, even the Des Moines Register.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah. And it's not just lawsuits either.
What else?
They talk about the FCC investigation into PBS and NPR.
Oh, yeah, those public broadcasting things.
Right. And the threats to cut off their funding.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So basically, like, if you criticize me...
You're going to pay the price.
Yeah. you get punished.
Exactly. And that sends a really chilling message.
Right. It's like they're trying to silence anyone who disagrees with them.
That's how it comes across.
And then what about the courts? Like, what's going on there?
Well, that's another area where the speaker sees a real threat.
Okay.
They talk about how Trump has tried to impeach judges just because he didn't like their rulings.
Oh, wow. That's like really messing with the system, right?
Yeah, the judiciary is supposed to be independent.
Right.
It's not supposed to be swayed by political pressure.
Yeah, so what the speaker is saying is that even when they disagreed with Supreme Court decisions like Citizens United or Roe v. Wade,
Right.
they never tried to get the judges kicked off the court.
Exactly.
They respected the rule of law.
That's right. They believed in working within the system to change things,
Right.
even if they didn't like the outcome.
Okay, so that's a pretty big difference in how they approach things.
It really is a fundamental difference in philosophy.
Yeah, and then it gets into this whole thing about universities, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
They were talking about all this criticism of like courses and activities at places like Harvard,
Right.
Columbia, Princeton, these big-name schools.
Yeah.
And the speaker points out how this seems to go against this whole conservative idea of like decentralized government
Right.
and local control of things like education.
Exactly. Like, why is the federal government suddenly so concerned with what's being taught in these universities?
Right. Seems like a bit of a contradiction.
It does seem a bit hypocritical.
Yeah, and then there's this stuff about the foreign students that just seems like straight up creepy.
Yeah, those examples are really disturbing.
Okay, so tell me about that. What happened?
Well, the speaker mentions these two students.
Okay.
One of them had written something critical of Israel, and the other one had been at a protest.
Okay.
They were both picked up by federal agents.
In like unmarked vans or something.
Yeah, it sounds like something out of a movie.
It's scary.
Yeah, it is.
So basically what they're saying is that if you speak out against the government,
You could end up being targeted.
yeah, even if you're not a citizen.
Exactly. It raises serious questions about freedom of speech and the right to dissent.
Yeah. And then there's this whole thing about Trump appointing himself to run the Kennedy Center.
Right. The Kennedy Center honors.
Yeah, it just seems like he wants to control everything.
Yeah, he wants to be in charge of everything.
Culture war and all that.
Exactly. It's all part of this larger pattern of consolidating power and silencing opposition.
Okay, so we've got oligarchy, we've got authoritarianism. What else is in this bad news buffet?
Well, the speaker also talks about this whole push to dismantle federal agencies.
Okay, like get rid of them completely?
Well, maybe not completely, but to definitely weaken them.
Right.
And they specifically point to Trump and Musk again.
Okay.
And they say that they're basically trying to destroy these agencies that help working families and poor people.
So, like, what agencies are we talking about?
Well, they specifically mention the Social Security Administration.
Right.
You know, the one that provides benefits to the elderly and disabled.
Yeah.
And they claim that Musk laid off thousands of employees there.
Oh, wow. So that would make it harder for people to get their benefits.
Exactly. It would create huge backlogs and delays.
Right.
And then they talk about the Veterans Administration.
Okay, the VA.
Right. And they say that Trump and Musk decided to get rid of something like 83,000 employees.
Oh, my gosh. What? That's a lot.
It's a massive number. And the implication is that this is going to seriously harm veterans' access to health care.
Right.
And make it much harder for them to get the benefits they deserve.
Yeah, that's pretty messed up.
It is a pretty grim picture.
Okay, so to wrap up this whole bad news section,
Yeah.
the speaker talks about tax cuts for the wealthy.
Right.
So what's the deal with that?
Well, they bring up this Republican reconciliation bill
Okay.
that supposedly wants to make massive cuts to all these important programs.
Like what kind of programs?
Medicaid, education, nutrition assistance, all sorts of things that help people.
Wow.
And the reason they're doing this is to pay for over $1 trillion in tax breaks for the richest 1% of Americans.
Oh, so basically they're taking money from the poor.
And giving it to the rich.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it sounds like.
It's a classic Robin Hood in reverse scenario.
Yeah. Okay, so that's a lot to take in all this bad news.
It is a lot.
But the good news is there's more.
That's right. The video doesn't end there.
Okay. So let's switch gears now.
All right.
And talk about this whole good news part, this path forward.
Yeah.
Let's
get to the hope.
Okay, so the speaker seems pretty convinced that there's this, like, growing resistance to all this stuff we just talked about.
Yeah, people are waking up.
Yeah, and one of the things they point to is this Fighting Oligarchy tour.
Right.
Tell me about that. What is that all about?
Well, it's basically a series of rallies that the speaker and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez have been holding all over the country.
Right.
Places like Nebraska, Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan, Nevada, Colorado, Arizona.
Wow, so they're going all out.
Yeah, they're covering a lot of ground.
Yeah.
And the video makes a big deal about how huge the crowds have been at these rallies.
Okay, like how huge are we talking?
Well, they say that over 34,000 people showed up in Denver, which is apparently the biggest crowd the speaker has ever seen.
So that's a lot of people.
Yeah, it definitely shows that there's a lot of energy and enthusiasm out there.
Right, people are fired up.
Exactly.
So what's the message at these rallies? What are they telling people?
Well, basically, they're saying that people are sick and tired of Trumpism and oligarchy and authoritarianism, and that they're ready to fight back.
Okay, so it's like a call to action.
Exactly. It's about mobilizing people and getting them involved.
And are they planning to do more of these rallies?
Yeah, they mentioned some upcoming ones in California and other Western states.
Okay, so they're not letting up.
No, they're keeping the momentum going.
Okay, so besides these rallies, what else is giving the speaker hope?
Well, they also point to some recent election results that they see as positive signs.
Okay, like what?
Well, one big one is this victory of Susan Crawford.
Who's that?
She's a judge who just won an election for the Wisconsin Supreme Court.
Okay.
And she beat a candidate who is backed by Elon Musk.
Oh, wow. So that's a big deal.
Yeah, it's a big win.
Yeah.
Especially because she won by a pretty big margin.
Okay.
In a state that Trump won in the last election.
Oh, wow. So that suggests maybe things are shifting a bit.
That's the hope that maybe people are starting to turn against this whole Trumpist agenda.
Okay. And any other election results that are encouraging?
Yeah. They also mentioned these 2 congressional districts in Florida where Trump won by like 30 points.
Wow.
But in recent elections, Democratic candidates have done much better.
Okay.
They've cut the margin in half.
So they're getting closer.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got rallies. We've got some promising election results.
Right.
Now what's the plan? How do we actually move forward?
Well, the speaker's pretty clear about that.
Okay, lay on it.
They say the answer is quite obvious.
Okay.
We need to educate, organize, and fight back.
Right, make some noise.
Yeah, but it's not just about making noise.
Okay.
They emphasize that it needs to be a disciplined and intelligent fight.
Right, so we need a strategy.
Exactly. We can't just be reactive.
Yeah.
We need a plan.
Okay, so what's the plan?
Well, they talk a lot about grassroots organizing.
Okay, so like getting people involved at the local level.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Door knocking, phone banking, holding meetings.
Yeah.
And they say they're putting a lot of resources into hiring organizers.
Okay.
Especially in these Republican-held districts.
Right.
Where the margins are really close.
So like swing districts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They even give this example of a phone call they had with over 500 people in Iowa's 1st district.
Right.
And almost everyone on the call signed up to volunteer.
That's pretty impressive.
It shows that there's a real appetite for change out there.
Yeah. And what's the goal of all this organizing? What are they trying to achieve?
Well, one of the main things they talk about is making sure that people in those close Republican districts are really loud and clear about their opposition to these tax breaks for billionaires that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
You know, the ones that are coming at the expense of programs for working families?
Right. So they want to put pressure on those Republican lawmakers.
Exactly. They want to make it politically costly for them to support those policies.
Okay. So it's like a bottom-up approach.
That's right. It's about empowering people at the grassroots level to make their voices heard.
Yeah. But the speaker isn't like naive about this, right?
No, they're realistic about the challenges ahead.
Okay.
They acknowledge that these oligarchs,
the
people with all the money and power,
yeah,
are a formidable force.
Yeah, I'd imagine.
They control a lot of the media.
Right.
They have a lot of influence in Washington.
Yeah, it's a tough fight.
It is.
But the speaker seems to think that they can be beaten.
Yeah, they're optimistic.
Okay, so how do we do it?
Well, they say it's all about being smart and organized.
Right.
And building a broad-based movement.
Okay, so like bringing people together from all different backgrounds.
Exactly, transcending these divisions of race, religion, sexual orientation, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And uniting around an agenda that benefits everyone.
Okay, so it's like a message of hope and unity.
That's right.
Yeah, and the video ends on a pretty powerful note.
It does.
As they say.
They say, we can win, we will win.
Wow, that's a strong statement.
Yeah, it's a call to action.
Right.
They're saying that if we work together, we can overcome these challenges and create a better future.
Okay, so to kind of sum it all up, what we've got here is this really stark warning about where the country is headed under Trump.
Towards oligarchy, authoritarianism, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And policies that benefit the wealthy at the expense of everyone else.
Right.
But then it shifts to this more hopeful message about how there's this growing resistance.
Yeah, people are getting engaged.
Right. There are some encouraging signs in recent elections, and there's a plan for how to move forward.
Okay.
A strategy based on grassroots organizing and education.
So it's kind of like a call to action.
It is. It's a call for people to get involved and fight for the kind of country they want to live in.
Yeah, so it's a pretty powerful message.
It is.
I mean, it leaves us with a lot to think about.
Definitely.
So I guess the question is, given everything we've just talked about, what do you think?
Yeah, what resonates with you?
What actions or what ways of getting involved do you think would be most effective?
Yeah, what speaks to you?
Yeah, that's something for everyone to kind of ponder.
For sure.
All right, well, that's our deep dive into where do we go from here?
Thanks for joining us.
We'll see you next time.
See ya. Bye.